Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar this afternoon with Ian Proudfoot. Now, before I pass over to Ian, I just wanted to take you through a few little bits of admin. I'm Julia Jones, Head of Analytics for NZX. And look, if you have any questions, just in that box there, just pop them in and we'll have a question and answer session at the end, and I can ask those questions for you. Around your audio, although we have you on mute, that shouldn't impact you hearing what's happening. So what we suggest is you follow those instructions there, just check your PC, your volume's on, and worst case scenario, dial in using your phone. We've seen that. Some people have better success with that. Now, I'm going to pass over to Ian now. I had the fortune of working for Ian for many years, and he has had a significant impact on my life. So I'm so excited to be able to bring him to you today. So I am going to now test my amazing skills and hand him over to you.
Is that working?
Yes.
Yep, I'll bring this up. Cool. Well, thanks very much, Julia. And I assume you can hear me. Right.
Yep.
Cool. So good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for the opportunity to have a chat through. So one of the things that we've been doing in the last couple of weeks is talking to a lot of leaders across New Zealand's food and fibre sectors, as well as my colleagues in our international networks around the world, to sort of get a bit of a sounding on what's happening with the food system as we move into this new and completely disruptive era that obviously we're all facing. So what I'd like to do today is talk around this concept of the now normal future. Now normal because it's the reality we face today, a future that has been created incredibly quickly for us, and also talk about where that creates an opportunity therefore for New Zealand moving forward. Before we go into that though, I sort of want to go back 8 weeks and just have a very quick sort of reflection on what we were talking about at the back end of last year and early this year. I think it's useful because while, you know, it feels everything has changed, not everything has changed. The reality is some of those fundamentals we were talking about 8 weeks ago, while they have not been top of mind for the last 8 weeks, the reality is they will still there. We will beat this disease, and those issues will come back to being the key fundamental issues that we need to think about. We may be dealing with them in a different way, but the fundamentals will stay the same. So what we've been talking about for around the last 5 years, since 2015, is this concept of the global agrarian revolution. So this is bringing together the true digitization of the food and fibre production sector. Now, if you look, it ties very nicely with the World Economic Forum's concept of the fourth industrial revolution, so I 4.0, this concept of fusion technology. So when you're looking at that, what we see is effectively how you fuse biological, physical, and digital technologies together. And you know, that's what a farmer's always done. They've taken a plant or an animal, and they've then connected that with a digital solution, being the knowledge of their farm, and a physical solution being a tractor or a spade or whatever tools they've been using. Fuse that together to grow something, initially to feed themselves and then ultimately to feed other people and create businesses out of it. What changes is each of those bubbles. So biological now becomes about how we use genetic technologies, how bioproducts and some of the bioengineering we can do starts to impact on how our system works. From a physical perspective, we start talking about drones and robots and a whole range of other issues. And I'll touch on that later in terms of what COVID may mean for some of that. And then we see the digital, and the digital is not just now the intuition of the farmer, although that's still an important part of the equation. It's also about how we use AI and big data and the tools that enable us to bring information together and consolidate and find an answer. That sweet spot, that unlocks this new opportunity, and there's a huge amount of money coming in behind that transformation. You know, we looked in 2018, 2019, we're looking somewhere between 16 and 18 billion dollars US of funding coming in to these disruptive opportunities. So that has created a huge amount of change. And I suppose when we talk about this, what that change is all about is delivering the right product to the consumer in the right place at the right time. I'm just going to briefly tell you a story. Last year, we took a group of senior executives in New Zealand's primary sector to the Netherlands, and we all arrived. It was wet, it was cold, it was February, and we spent some time on the first day touring around, and we visited the controlled cropping centre that Wageningen University runs, and a couple of really cool Dutch agri-food businesses. Then in the evening, we ended up back in Amsterdam and at this particular restaurant. So we'd managed to get across the pavement, which, as any of you been to Amsterdam will know, that's not always easy. There's some very high-speed bicycles moving around and they don't stop. But we got 27 jet-lagged New Zealand executives into this what was referred to as a plant-forward eating space. We had a great meal. We ate a lot of very interesting food. There wasn't a lot of meat, which stressed some of our colleagues from the meat industry sector, but we had a plant-forward meal. But we weren't there for the meal. We were there to meet this young lady called Isabel Bourdam. Now, Isabel's a hippie vegetarian in Dutch speak, and she's a social media influencer, got hundreds and hundreds of thousands of followers. And she also runs something called Week Without Meat in the Netherlands that has many, many thousands of people get in behind it and take the week and don't eat meat. What she is, though, is somebody who consults to a lot of the major food companies in Europe around conscious consumerism, so making conscious decisions in what you eat. So we asked Isabel a lot of questions, and we got some really good answers, and we got some answers that we had some questions about. But when we got to the crux of it, she said one thing that really, for all of us, struck home. She said, in the future, people won't eat bad food. Eating bad food will be like smoking cigarettes, something you just don't do. Then she said, actually, what people will eat is good food. And good food will pay a premium for it. We'll want to understand the ethics of the producer. We'll want to understand everything that's gone on in the production of that food. And in the end, it's not the retailer, it's not the distributor, it's not the processor, it's not the farmer that determines if it's good food. It's the consumer. And what she'd just given us, I felt, was the solution for New Zealand agriculture. In the end, we have to be the producer of good food. And therefore, if we're going to be the producer of good food, we have to engage very closely with our consumers, because they are the people that will make that decision as to whether we're producing good food or not. A week later, I was in Melbourne at the Evoke Ag Summit last year, and this banner came up, Australian good meat. The reality is, I suppose, from my perspective, that really sort of brought home to me, this is something that around the world people are starting to think about. How do you engage and how do you make your food good food? So what we were talking about last year, and what is still incredibly relevant, is that we now live in rather than a value chain, we live in a value web, and the consumer sits at the value web. And the consumer's connected to everybody. They've got the ability through technology to understand exactly who is contributing to what they're going to eat. And therefore, the input providers, the people that are providing the seeds or providing the agri-chemicals, they're important to the equation. The government and how they regulate are important. Research institutes and the innovation that comes to the table is important, but equally the community is important and how it provides that license to operate. And they're all parties we would never have put on the lineal value chain. But the reality is they all contribute to a consumer making a decision as to whether your product is good or bad. That becomes, in my mind, as important, if not more important, in terms of being consumer-centric. Now we move into this new era following the pandemic. And really the way I want to start the conversation around the impact of the pandemic is quite simple. It's fundamentally saying this is not something we can go back and find the answers to in history. We can take learnings from history and how we've responded to other situations. And, we can look at the GFC, the companies that pulled the levers quickly and made change and redirected and took advantage of the opportunities, recovered faster. There's a fair chance the same thing will apply this time. But none of us have lived through a period of this level of dramatic change that quickly. So fundamentally, what we're in is a now normal world where actually making sure you're seeing the world in front of you clearly becomes really important. And I'll come back to that towards the end. First thing I would like to say is that the awareness of food in our lives is greater than it has been for a very significant period of time. I would put since the Second World War and the last time we had some significant food shortages. The reality is, we've all had to experience probably queuing to get into supermarkets. We've had to experience when we get into the supermarkets, empty shelves. So all those sort of challenges have meant that we now understand that food is not guaranteed to arrive. And therefore, because it's not guaranteed to arrive, actually the value that it has to us and the role that it plays in our lives, when you take away everything else and all we've got left is shelter and food and family, those three things come back to being the most important things that we have to deal with. So let's talk through some of the implications. The first one here is that the pandemic has swept across the world, causing massive social and economic harm. I think most of people, given that the news has contained nothing else now for a few months, would recognise that that is the case. We're sort of the fundamentals, we're not going to be travelling anywhere internationally for a significant period of time. That means we're going to have to think very carefully about how we connect with people that we sell our products to, because they will still be overseas. We need to recognise that actually what we're dealing with is a big biosecurity incursion. A disease has moved very quickly from country to country. That's going to change how people think about how they protect their borders. And that won't just be around human health, it will flow back into animal and plant health as well. So I look at it and I go, we're in for a new wave of biosecurity control. Biosecurity is going to become something that's not just been fashionable in New Zealand and Tasmania, but will be fashionable all over the world. The global freight pathways that we have to deal with have changed quite dramatically. The fact we have 50% less aircraft flying around, the fact that there's significantly less capacity available even for food because we're having to freight protective equipment around the world. All of those have created new challenges, but unlock new opportunities as well. Airlines have got a lot of spare planes at the moment. They're happy to talk about different ways to use those aircraft to get their people back to work and start creating some income off those assets. And then the one that's really important is I think we are going to see a shift towards unilateralism. It's the old Trump put America first. That trend is starting to accelerate in other countries. Countries have had a real shock. They've been let down by their international suppliers. We've seen Vietnam close the door on rice exports. That's had huge impacts on many, many countries in terms of rice. So with that, you can see countries are going to think more about how they can maintain intervention stocks. They're going to provide more support to the local agriculture system. They're going to try and make more of their food domestically produced. So while I don't think we're going to back away entirely from international trade is going to have to be done a lot more carefully. And on this basis that international trade can support local production as opposed to replace local production. And that's going to be an interesting challenge as to how we navigate that as a small exporting nation. Second theme that stands out for me is this theme around food availability and it no longer being taken for granted. We've all had to face the empty shelves. And I think we've probably all ended up doing a bit of baking. I know that my family have already decided what my baking activity will be for the weekend already. And that's seems to be now a weekly event that they spend a long time negotiating that between themselves with me having no involvement. But when I look at it, what that means and what we've all done is probably reconnected a bit to how we cook, but in doing that, we've reconnected to some of our customary foods, some of the stuff that we recognize and feel comfortable with because it's the stuff we had as kids. And that reality means that, how much are we going to see rapid acceleration in this expansion of a global ethnic diet that we were moving towards? My take is I think that will slow down. I think it will take us longer to see that development occur, and I think we'll see a lot of product innovation in the foods of home. Taste of comfort, that sort of stuff will be where some of our food producers focus their efforts in the next year or two. I also think we will see more of a focus on circularity and systems as local food becomes more common. We'll see more and more people being prepared to think about how they are producing the products locally, and therefore how do they make sure it becomes circular? What else can they do? How can you use co-products? All those questions start to come onto the table as opportunities to create more business value and actually create businesses that contribute towards a recovery from the recessions that all of us are facing. And I think every country is going to be developing a national food strategy. In New Zealand, we don't have a national food strategy. We haven't had one for over 30 years. The reality is that we need one. we have a huge food insecurity issue in this country at the moment. We've gone from having around about 500,000 to over 1 million people that are now food insecure. And when we've got that level of food insecurity, we need to now have a plan as to how we will feed our 5 million first. We as a country produce more than enough food. Making sure that we actually can use that food to feed our people becomes important. That ties into the whole theme around food security. Food security has been an issue that I've talked about for a long time, and it's an issue that's very important when I'm not in New Zealand and when I'm not in OECD countries. But if I'm in countries like China, then the role and the importance of the issue to governments is absolutely being in the top 2 or 3 issues. For many countries, maintaining affordable, sufficient supply of nutritious food has been a key for governments staying in power. So, fundamentally, what we expect to see is more governments bringing food security up into their top 5 or top 10 issues, and therefore more focus being put on the investment into a robust food system. Singapore's a great example of a country that's investing behind a food system and needs to recognize that, or wants to recognize that it can produce more of its food itself. I'm stuck. Excuse me. Just got something stuck in the throat. But what does that mean? A couple of things I think it means is, firstly, we're going to see a lift in investment in rural infrastructure that enables us to be able to grow better in a more consistent way and deliver returns from our land in a more stable pattern. So, one area that I talked last week with the Epidemic Response Committee at Parliament about was the need to invest in water. Now, when you look at the history of big economic shocks, the immediate response of every government is to try and inject some financial stimulus into the economy, and to do that by trying to build more roads. And that's an easy response to this one as well. But the trouble is, if we've got an aspiration of being as carbon zero country, building more roads isn't necessarily the right answer. Building water storage enables us to become more climate resilient, because we've noticed that we're seeing more droughts around the country. So by doing that, we can actually build to a position where we can see a better, more secure country, a better, more secure food system by investing in assets that secure our rural communities. So I'm really, really hopeful that when we see the budget next week, we're going to see a change from this government and see some serious money being put into water storage schemes in Northland, in Waikato, in East Coast, in the Hawke's Bay, in Marlborough, to provide us with that water resilience we need as a country to enable us to be able to grow food consistently. I also think that, when you get to food security, it's a responsibility of everybody. The food system is not successful if everybody is not fed. So I think the whole question of social license is now people are more focused on food. The food sector itself cannot ignore its role in ensuring that our people get fed. That doesn't mean farmers should be giving away food or subsidizing the food of the community. But what it does mean is we need to think smartly about ensuring enough food is made available to our people. And that probably means we need new business models and new approaches to addressing that issue. Another thing that comes out from the pandemic to me is the concerns citizens have got around the safety of their environment. We've all been told to stay at home. It's safer to be at home has been the consistent message for the last 7 weeks. So for many of our citizens, coming back out into the environment, particularly those that are at higher risk, particularly old people and older members of our community, they're going to be incredibly nervous about the environment that comes out. And then the experiences they're going to face are going to be quite stark. There's now a plastic screen between you and the checkout operator. Everybody's wearing masks, everybody's wearing gloves, sanitizer all over the place. The ability to choose your own product out of bulk bins has gone because they've been closed. So I think it's going to take a long time for people to recover confidence in the environments they operate in. And as a consequence, one of the things we're suggesting to people is they really apply a COVID-19 lens to every aspect of their business and the whole process that consumers engage through the business, so that they think about actually what's that experience going to feel like, and is that an experience you want to engage with. Another point that comes up and comes out of this, and we can see it already, is people want products that are not being handled by humans. So when I look at it, you know, we were on a track, fast track probably, towards a European packaging system where there's as little plastic as possible, as much is unwrapped, and therefore people are touching and feeling and picking products up. That's a complete contrast to what I call the North Asian system, where everything comes wrapped. What we're seeing, I think, is a real pivot towards consumers will probably want the North Asian system. They're just going to want the packaging to be sustainable. So I think we're going to see a lot of moves to take human touch, or the impression of human touch, out of the food system, and people will, as a consequence, be looking to think about how they can make that step sustainable. And you can see it already in the fish sections in some of our supermarkets. You know, they're no longer putting the fish and having somebody touch the fish or handle the fish to pass it across to you. It's now coming in a wrapped container, and you know, sealed plastic like meat's always been sold in. And that's the sort of developments we expect to see occurring around the world. So that trend to minimal packaging, I think in the short term, it's gone. I think it will probably come back over time, but at least for the next couple of years, people are going to be more comfortable with something that's been wrapped. Another issue that's significant for us is obviously around border controls. And the reality is that, you know, our borders are not going to be open for free movement for at least another 12 to 18 months beyond Australia, probably. So we are going to need to think about what that means. We are an industry that has had a lot of jobs available. And to fill those jobs, we have had to bring in immigrant or temporary casual labour from overseas, be that students on a gap year or somebody coming in to work on a vintage on a vineyard or whatever. And those people are not going to be here. We've seen some really cool pivots in the last sort of 6 to 8 weeks, from a mix of predominantly international to predominantly New Zealand, particularly in the kiwi fruit sector. But those pivots are going to now need to become permanent moves, and that's going to be challenging. So what I expect to see in respect of labour is we've talked a lot in recent years about the opportunity to mechanise or roboticize some of the processes, and it's probably been cheap labour. Well, yeah, it's a good thing to do, but there's a preference to not do it because labour is cheaper. Labour is not going to be as cheap. So I think the move to mechanise some of those processes will now accelerate and get a real boost, and I think we'll see innovation and spending in those technologies. Also expect to see, you know, a need to build some real partnerships with government around how we redeploy and retrain some of the displaced labour in our country. That's going to be a big step, but it's an important step. We've got to be selling the opportunities in the food and fibre sector to the wider community and making sure people understand there are good, valid, justifiable career opportunities that they can pursue in this sector. Then the other point I've just got on there is around the future of the RSE scheme. And you know, that is an amazing scheme that has helped so many island villages to gain some economic prosperity and build some wealth. And that scheme, I believe, is critically important we find a way for it to continue, because it isn't just a scheme about providing us with labour. It's a scheme about providing opportunity to our Pacific neighbours. But, you know, where the rules stand at the moment, that is going to be a very, very hard scheme to maintain. So I'm hoping to see the government really show a strong commitment to retaining that as we move forward. Next theme, it's not going to surprise you, is one around digital technology. You know, the fact we're doing this webinar on Zoom rather than having physical face-to-face sessions as we've always done before is an indication of the way that society has evolved. We've all learned to use multiple communication tools. I think this is my 4th now. Julia's just given me a lesson on today. But the reality is that you know, so social isolation has accelerated the uptake of digital. I think we've gone, basically in the last 2 weeks, we have gone through that inflection point. And nowadays, digital is not the side part of your business that you fill in 5% of activity just to keep people busy outside the mainstream, which, you know, it has been for, you know, think about a restaurant. Yeah, we'll use Uber Eats and we'll have it on until 6 p.m. and then we'll have it on after 9 p.m. and that fills up the shoulders for us and keeps the kitchen a bit busier while we get warmed up and warm out of the main service in the dining room. What we're now saying is actually digital is your primary front door, or potentially your primary front door, and a lot of consumers are going to walk through that door. So thinking about how that experience is as good as the experience that you deliver to your customers traditionally becomes really important. That's going to mean potentially you need to think about new processes and new resources there to support your digital business, as opposed to it being a low-cost add-on to your existing business. I think the model changes. We don't have too many truly digital food businesses in New Zealand. I think that will change. And then we need to think about how we continue to engage with those people that can't come here. Now, we get between 4 or 5 million visitors a year that will not be visiting us for at least the next year. So engaging those people and keeping those that are New Zealander files attached to our products and attracting people in so that when we do reopen, they know New Zealand food already and they're keen to come here is really important. I've suggested that we redeploy the funding from Tourism New Zealand towards promoting food for the foreseeable future, because I think that keeps New Zealand in people's minds and gives us the opportunity to sell our foods and build a platform that our companies can use in international markets. But, you know, I think we may need to make sure we've got immersive digital experiences, ways that people can engage entirely with our society and with the products we're offering and get a great experience. And that's really important to keep people connected and customers engaged in the stories we tell. And then, you know, I honestly believe, and I can see from the numbers, there's been an interesting tracker website with food companies been listing themselves on it over the last 4 or 5 weeks. And it started off with 40 or 50 companies on it at the start of the lockdown. And I think I checked it 2 days ago and it was over 1,000 companies. So, you know, we now have a digital high street. That ability to go and choose from 5 or 6 different retailers and buy products from artisan producers is all there now in front of us, and digital and easy. And, you know, therefore, I think that raises some fundamental questions about what the bricks and mortar future look like for our retail sector. Another theme that stands out for me is around health. You know, we've all been told that our health is incredibly important. We've heard a lot of information about how we protect our health. So when we're looking at that, you know, I think we are going to see consumers now recognizing that the role of immunity boosting, the role of a health improving property in a product is going to be something that becomes a front of pack attribute, as opposed to saying somewhere on the bottom panel that, yeah, this has got some vitamin C on it. It's actually going to be, you know, this is the story we want to tell. This has a better chance of keeping your family healthy and stopping you getting a virus. So from my perspective, I think health benefits of functional foods and nutraceuticals, and where there's a proven scientific health benefit, those products are going to have a huge opportunity to take a real large step forward in their markets. I've put on there that functional and nutraceutical go stratospheric, and that's my honest belief. I think that is going to be a massive growth category for the next, well, for the foreseeable future. And but interestingly, you know, it does raise a question about novel foods. You know, there's always been a question: is a novel food actually as good as the naturally produced equivalent, the milk from the cow or the meat from a beef cattle? Well, you know, I think that's going to really come into focus now. And if a novel food delivers better health benefits, it's going to really take off. If it can't match the natural product, then to my mind, it will become a footnote in history, and the society will move on looking for better solutions. So if you are producing novel foods, I think the answer is you've got to be very careful in designing into those foods what solutions you want them to deliver. So just a couple more to run through quickly. One is, you know, I think it's pretty clear the economic impacts of this are going to be long. So that does mean our customers are going to have less money. So thinking about how you design the products you're going to present to those customers becomes really important. How can you present your products to them so in a way that makes sense and creates, you know, enables them to keep buying? That may mean it has to be smaller. Maybe the price point has to change. It may mean the channel it gets sold through is no longer the same channel. Premium will look different. There's going to be an austerity premium, and we need to make sure we're playing in that space. In the same way, I think, we are going to see a commoditization and acceleration of plant-based options. So, as animal proteins are not going to get significantly cheaper, people will have less money, they'll be more inclined to try the alternative. And I think that will mean that will unlock a growth in that particular sector. And the other point I've just noted there is that governments do need to enable global trade. So we've got to be really good about keeping markets open, but we need to make sure there's containers for product to leave the country. So that means the government may actually intervene to ensure that it's economically viable for the shipping companies to bring empty containers here. And that's something I would like to ensure that is happening, because if you look around the challenge, one of the big challenges we've had over the last 8 weeks has been getting products offshore. We've got customers, we just can't get the boxes to get it out the country. And then ensuring if we are sending something overseas, that insurance is available when we're sending to customers that may or may not be able to pay in 6 to 8 weeks' time when the product arrives. So thinking about how you have some crown-backed export insurance to me makes sense as well. One point I do just want to touch on is that, the big issue, if you think back to the World Economic Forum in January, we had Greta versus Trump, and that role around the future of our planet and the role that the climate crisis or the greenhouse gases are going to play in how we define our successors as this era of leaders, that hasn't changed. We still have a planet that's warming. The fact we've taken all the planes out of the air is a temporary impact that has slowed that level of growth, but it hasn't stopped the fact that the climate is warming. So for me, we had an aspiration in our food and fibre sector as to where we want to go. That aspiration remains incredibly relevant. So we need to continue to track towards that aspiration. What we need to recognise, though, is that we may not be able to go as fast as we were planning to go because we have less money. And if we are pushed to still keep the same speed, that is not sustainable. Because sustainable is not just making sure we're doing the right thing by the environment, it has to be financially viable as well. So I think making sure the pace of change is right, but the aspiration should stay strong. And for me, we need to recognise that governments are going to be supporting their food and fibre sectors around the world to make environmental improvements as part of investment in the recovery that they are making in their own countries. We need to ensure our government's doing the same. I'm not saying we need direct subsidies, but I do come back to the point I made earlier, but investing in that transformational infrastructure as part of stimulus that helps create a more resilient food and fibre sector for climate is important. And then the final point I just want to touch on in relation to these sort of trends is that history actually is going to record this as a food safety failing. It came from a wet food market in Wuhan, some animals that were put next to each other that shouldn't have been, that ultimately maybe one of them ate each other, we don't quite know, but it was a food distribution center that did not work properly, that ultimately has resulted in the transfer of this disease into the human chain, at least as far as most experts seem to be believing at the moment. So if that's the case, I think what this crisis will ultimately do is it will look for people who can provide traceable, trusted, safe food. You think about how New Zealand's crushed the curve. We are a provider of safe food. We're in a great position to be able to tell a story about our integrity as a producer of food. We're well positioned to benefit from the bottom line that is going to be important for our society. So from my perspective, what we should be doing is being loud and proud, but making sure we then back that with the technology to enable us to be able to tell consumers with certainty and comfort the provenance of our products right. Also, you shouldn't ignore the fact that this has already become a debate between the plant-based and the animal-based sectors. The plant-based sector is saying if we didn't have animals in our food system, we wouldn't have had the pandemic. So that argument is going to play out, and for some people, that's already an argument that they're saying, well, that maybe means we might think about moving towards vegetarianism. So the reality is, I think that change is going to, that argument is going to become part of the narrative that we're going to need to address in the sector. And then the final point, the things like controlled growing systems. So our vertical farms that are very, very locked down, they use a lot of algorithms to operate, produce food close to the consumer, which is in a completely sealed and protected environment. That's a pretty powerful and attractive solution to a lot of farmers at the moment. So I think we will see an uptake in those technologies. And if I'm a betting man, I think that's where we'll see a lot of investment go around the world. So what does all that mean? Well, it's quite simple from my perspective. And it's all about ET in a car park. So if you're an alien, or if you're ET and you come down and look at our environment as it was 6 to 8 weeks ago, you would have seen every day a whole heap of cars in the morning being driven into the city and parked in a car park, where the person that drive the cars went and spent their day working hard in an office while the cars sat around with their friends in the garage having fun, or at least not having to work. Then the person would finish their day's work and they would drive the car home, where they would tuck it up at home in the garage and then go and rush around again, getting ready for tomorrow. So if you were the alien looking at that society in front of you, you would have seen a world where you probably would have concluded that the cars were controlling it because they were the ones having the easy life, and the humans were the people that were really having to work hard to make the cars happy. And, you know, that's just shows if you look at the world through a different set of eyes, you might see a completely different answer. And, you know, as leaders of our industries, as people that lead our organizations, the experience we bring to our organizations is the biggest selling point. It's why they employ us. But also it's our biggest constraint. It's the backpack on our backs. It's the parachute that holds us back, because it means that we see things through the way we've been trained to see them. It's called educated incapacity. What we need to do, and what's more important than ever in the coming 6 to 12 months, is to make sure we're seeing the world as it is, not how we think the world should be. And if you think about that, that means you need to be prepared to bring in more people into your conversation, bring in diverse opinions, use the young people in your organization and see what they're seeing and listen to them and learn from them. Because the likelihood is the more views you have on what all these signals mean, you'll find the one that enables you to unlock and push forward faster and create value for your organization. So as I say, now's the time to be the alien, to stand out and to make sure you're looking at that world in a way that it is, not the way you think it should be. And finally, I think what we're in is the period of the most significant disruption we could ever wish for. And the great thing about disruption is disruption always brings opportunity. So this is the chance to do things differently. People expect change. Your customers will be open to change. So making sure now that you actually reshape your future. This is the chance to move forward and really seize on that opportunity. I've always talked about export double, or being the industry can go from being a 40 million sector to a 60 billion sector. You know, I think this is the opportunity for us to go from 45 to 160. You know, there is such massive opportunity in front of us, and we are a producer of safe, trusted food, and we're a safe country because we've crushed this disease. So we should take advantage of that opportunity. So thanks very much for listening this afternoon. I'm happy to now take any questions. So I'll invite Julia to come back on and manage that. And just as I said, we have released a new report today, so it's available on our website. So feel free to jump on and download it. It sort of provides a bit more detail around all of this.
We look forward to getting stuck into that, Ian, and learning more. Hey, I guess from what I've heard you talk about today is really it's and this heartens me, is potentially the rise of the weird. If there's something a little bit quirky or different, or those people who may not think laterally, now is the time to have courage and confidence to step up and step out.
I think that's absolutely the case. I think now this is the time where there is the opportunity to those things that have been a little bit too quirky, or you've thrown away because they're just not quite practical. People are open to doing things differently. I was talking to the CEO of one of our food service businesses earlier today, and he was talking about some of the things they've done in the last couple of weeks, things that they would never have contemplated doing in their normal day-to-day environment, but they've done them because they had to. And suddenly he's going, well, some of this stuff's going to stick, and these will be new businesses for us. And you just look and you go, actually, there's no better time to do an experiment. And if you can experiment and that experiment makes you a bit greener, that's even better. because it helps you take you in the right direction towards where we need to head for the environment as well. So I look at it and I go, yeah, it's time to really bring those people out that have got the way out ideas, and they find those seeds of opportunity and really take advantage of them.
Now, I've got another question here. Is Ian, will health benefits be sought from tablet or whole food?
That's a really good question. I think it's going to be both. I think, a lot of consumers have rediscovered the art of cooking. And, although it's interesting, there's some stats coming out of the States that say, although everybody's been at home, sales of vegetables have absolutely plummeted because Americans are too scared to cook vegetables. So they'll eat vegetables at restaurants, but they won't cook them themselves because they're worried they'll ruin them. So, where are they going to get their nutrients from? Well, those sort of people are probably going to start to look for tablets. So I think it is going to be a mix. It is going to be functional foods, but it is also going to be, there's going to be growth in the nutraceuticals. And, that to me is an interesting opportunity, because alongside the foods we produce a whole heap of byproducts. And, you think about the meat sector, for instance, the fifth quarter, the part of the animal we don't eat, that's got a whole heap of stuff in there that could potentially be incredibly valuable in a nutraceutical environment. So I think there's a real now opportunity to accelerate the pace at which we've had that conversation about how we use our co-products to really make sure that we're finding what's got health benefits, and particularly if they help boost immunity, they're going to be very, very big opportunities.
Now, Ian, you talked about plant-based, potentially taking off, as some may see that this started with animals and is a problem. But then before that, you talked about novel foods and health. So are we going to end up with a sort of a value versus nutrition type of conundrum happening, or what are your thoughts on
that? That's an interesting question. I think personally what we will see is value will come from food that has higher nutrition. I think what I'm sort of the impression I'm getting, and this is just my view from what we're hearing and what we're listening to, but I see, as I mentioned, I see the sort of the health property of a product has very often been, the detail of it has been a back of pack attribute. It's been something that hasn't necessarily been the key selling story. We've been selling grass fed, and we've been selling GMO free, and we've been selling antibiotic free production systems. I see that health benefit now moving to be a really strong front of pack attribute. And therefore, if you don't have a health benefit, or you can't articulate one, I see that will potentially devalue the premium position of your product over time. So I think we're moving into a world where health is going to ultimately not become a driver of value, but it will become a ticket to play in that's going to be quite a significant shift over time, I think.
So when you talked about that government infrastructure spend, then would you say that there'd be a lot of value in ensuring that our science and measurement and ability to show the actual nutrient in our foods is one of those priorities?
Yeah, I think that is, and that's definitely got to be part of where government supports the industry. Doing that work is incredibly expensive because you can't just do it in one country. You've got to do it in every country you're going to sell the product into, and you've got to use recognizable people to do it. So if you're doing it in the States, you're doing it with Johns Hopkins or Mayo Clinic or Cleveland or one of those recognized sort of medical teaching hospitals, so you get a credible position behind it. And they don't come cheap. And so that's why we haven't done very much of it over time. The only product we really have in New Zealand that we sell with really strong proven health benefits is the green kiwi fruit. And that's been incredibly successful for us in terms of extracting additional value out of the fact that Haywood is this wonderful fiber bomb. The reality is that we've got to do that behind every single one of our products, and if our products don't have something unique, we're still got to demonstrate that the way we produce it here in New Zealand means that it's better than the competitors in terms of what it does deliver.
Awesome. Hey, now I've had one question emailed through. So do you think there is a serious opportunity to do more consumer-ready packaged goods in New Zealand, particularly dairy, rather than selling ingredients to be consumer manufactured offshore?
I think, that's probably been one of those things where we've said, oh, it's cheaper to do it offshore. But, I think now you've got to bring the health and the safety equation into that as well. And therefore, to me, thinking about more processed food is an opportunity for us, but only if we can really understand how we can process that food to add value to it. And that does mean it's got to be very aligned with what the consumers want, which actually means if we're going to do that, the first step of investing in that process is getting more people closer to the consumer, so we really understand the needs of the chef or the ultimate person that's going to use that product in their houses. Because if we're not close to them, we will not design the right products. And the last thing we want to do is create another spreadable butter when the world wanted margarine. So we've got to make sure that we are designing the product the world needs if we are going to do that, because otherwise we're wasting money.
Yeah, start with the consumer and work backwards.
Yeah, absolutely. It comes back to that consumer-centric value web. That's got to be the center of everything. The consumer is the center of our world.
And it doesn't really matter what the product is either, does it? Or the service. It's literally that's where it all begins and where it will end.
Yep. Mm.
Now I've got another one. Oh, sorry, I've just used the error here. Many food businesses use and rely on food products that are imported due to the net export conundrum. How do we amend the Buy New Zealand Made message to ensure we support New Zealand made products, but accept that some have imported ingredients?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because we can't produce everything here, and we shouldn't produce everything here because it doesn't make sense. So I think what we've, for us, I always get nervous if we start pushing buy local in New Zealand, because while I can see why the government are putting that noise out, and it's a way of creating an immediate stimulus, we're a trading nation. And we should be supportive of the people that produce the best products in the world in the best places at the right price for us, to make sure that we're supporting a free and open global trading system. So I think the key is we've got to ensure that we understand in this country that good trade benefits everybody, so that we can demonstrate to the world what good trade looks like, and then hopefully ensure that the countries we want to sell our products to continue to understand that we're a good trading partner and we benefit the wider economy in their country as well, and we can contribute to the stuff they can't produce as sustainably or as cost effectively as we can do, or as well as we can do, so that we maintain good trading relationships around the world.
But I guess it all starts with us getting our narrative right, isn't it? And actually having a sensible narrative that supports. I think we talk so much about creating value and we forget to capture the value we've already got or talk about it.
Yeah, and that comes back to some of the things that we talked about in last year's agribusiness agenda. The concept of feeding the 5 million first. We've got to get that right. This huge lift in food insecurity we've got in our society, we've got to make sure we don't let those extra 500,000 people become long-term food insecure people, because once somebody starts receiving food packages, it doesn't take too many food packages before they continue to receive those, and they receive them and basically on an indefinite basis. So making sure we give people the opportunity to not slip into the food safety net is really important, and that's something I'd like to see the government move a lot quicker on.
Yeah. Now there's one more here. Dairy is an important industry for both New Zealand as a food source employer and exporter. There has been pressure on the dairy industry for many areas. Credit, water quality, nutrients, peak cow at about 5 million dairy cows. Thoughts on specific opportunities for New Zealand dairy?
So New Zealand dairy is probably its opportunity, I don't think, has changed that much as a result of COVID-19. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Yep. I just had something flash up on the screen. So I think what we're looking at for New Zealand dairy is actually working out how it tells the story of natural dairy products, because if I see a sector where the substitution to plant is most likely, it's probably in the dairy sector. So I think making sure that that we're very clear on the complexity of natural milk, the health benefits it brings from drinking it, and then making sure that we're putting it to people in a way that they want to use it. And ultimately I've been saying for a little while that personally I believe if we produce slightly less milk, we could probably capture more value from the milk that we produce. Some of the nature of how we produce our milk streams means that we do end up with more commodity product than we probably want to be selling to the world. So ultimately, I think the New Zealand dairy sector, to continue to protect its license to operate, will see farmers produce in a different way, maybe move their farming system to being a slightly more multi-production system than purely dairy, so maybe doing a bit of cropping or a bit of horticulture alongside a dairy farm. So that ultimately will reduce the amount of cows they have. They'll get the amount of milk we produce will go down. The use of that milk will become more targeted into the higher value opportunities. So I ultimately see a dairy sector in New Zealand that's producing more value and more dollars while actually processing less milk. But I don't see that happening this year or next year. That's sort of a 10 to 15 year transition.
Cool. And this probably leads a little bit into that, really. It says that, over time you've talked about us exporting liquid milk rather than powders. Do you think the opportunity is still there to do so?
Absolutely. And, the challenge at the moment is there's not a lot of planes and you've got to use planes to do it. But at this point in time, when the government's very keen to think about how it can get in and help exporters, this may well be the time to really go hard and say, well, let's see about how we can load up an Air New Zealand plane and take only fresh milk on it up to China and see what happens. But I definitely still believe there is that for us, how we export liquid has to be still very much on the agenda for the industry.
Awesome. And look, just one last one is around credit. Someone's said there's a lot of, I guess, cheap money, but not an abundance of it. You've given us all some brilliant ideas to think about within the business, but how do we fund this? Any ideas on where the funding will come from?
I got the same question from Mr. Hosking on the radio this morning, but
I know.
Yeah, so for me it's simple. I think the settings we've got on overseas and international investment into New Zealand's agri-food is just wrong. So what I would like to see is an opening up of an ability for us to have sensible partnerships with positive overseas partners who want to bring capital to our businesses, but are also bringing more than capital. They're bringing market connection, they're bringing knowledge, they're bringing insight, they're bringing technology. And you form partnerships between New Zealand farmers or New Zealand capital providers and international capital providers, and that gives us a real strength. So I don't think I think there is still capital available here in New Zealand. Our capital tends to be a little bit conservative. We probably need some capital that's prepared to take a few more risks in this environment where we can't give people certainty about what's going to happen. But I would love to see us being more willing to mix that domestic capital with some more international capital so we can do bigger things faster.
Awesome. And now I will just squeeze another one in. Someone's asked about packaging. Is there an opportunity for us to move away from petrochemical packaging?
Yeah, no, I think that will be part of it. I think the realization that food will have to be a bit more packaged because of the fact that we're now concerned about transmission of diseases, and the reality is we've always had diseases that have always been transmitted, and the food sector has been prone to continuous food safety issues where we've had contamination. I think all of that's going to be much higher in people's focus, but the question now is how we do that sustainably. So there is some technologies out there, things like a peel, which is a film that can get sprayed on fruit, so it gives a sort of plastic film over the fruit, but doesn't detract from the quality of the fruit, but it does provide you with that protection you can remove before it gets used. Those sort of technologies that are sustainable, that are biodegradable, that are compostable, I can see all of that really accelerating. So that whole discussion around circularity of packaging, I think, is going to become far more important than it probably was as a side issue in Europe, and actually one they were trying to really get rid of by getting rid of packaging. will become a global conversation that will move with some pace.
Awesome. Right, and I'm going to leave it there because we've taken heaps of your
Cool.
time. Huge thank you, and everyone should get stuck into that report because I know there is some incredible insight in it. And everyone have a great day, and thanks for tuning in. And thanks again, Ian.
Thank you very much.